Canada is pulling the yellow card on its citizenry. Marty up north. What a week this week has been. I gotta say, like right off the get-go, we usually do a little powwow before we start this chat, and this week is like we were in the middle of it and just said, "Screw it, let's just do it."
Yeah, I'm wiping tears of joy off my eyes right now. We've been laughing so hard, and we've for the viewers, Clyde and I, quickly talk about potential topics. We just rhyme them off, and for this week had no problem coming up with like 15 topics. I mean, it's been a funny week, an extra funny week.
It's been a crazy week, all kinds of stuff going on, and just how ridiculous it gets on some levels. Like, the things that we have to talk about today.
What's most ridiculous today? We got to pick one. I'll throw three out there. For the viewers, there's Pierre with the Apple is going viral around the world.
Yes.
The House of Commons today. Maybe your viewers wouldn't have caught that because it was kind of.
I didn't even catch this.
A lot of people don't watch the House of Commons live, but the filibusters in the House of Commons happen, but never before has it been the Speaker of the House who does a 2-hour filibuster. So that's a little unusual. But I think my winner for this week's weird event has got to be the NDP convention in Hamilton and their yellow cards.
Well, let's just get into that because I got the video clip here where we can check this out. And this is like, okay, I gotta say that the socialists are no stranger to this kind of behavior, and I'll get into that afterwards because it happens all over the place. But now we're seeing it in Canada here, and here's the clip that's coming from their convention. I guess this was their grand opener, just as you said, ground rules or whatever.
Yeah. A reminder that we will enforce gender parity at the mics, and Adrian explained the process with the yellow card as well. So please remember to give space to those who face systemic barriers and discrimination, including women, Black, Indigenous, and racialized folk in particular, people living with disabilities, and 2S LGBTQIA+ folk. Our convention has special speaker priority for gender equity. If you identify with a gender other than men for the purpose of the equity-seeking rule, you will have received a piece of yellow card stock during the registration process.
You get it all ahead of
so
the
please
bureaucracy
raise
within a
this piece
bureaucracy.
of yellow
It's
card
crazy.
stock when you arrive at the mic.
You can stop it there. I mean, it just
It's
goes on
so
with
crazy.
the mics.
But this isn't the first time we've seen this. This is they accuse people of American-style politics these days. But this is a socialist convention that happened in the United States just about a year ago, and this one just cracks me up every time.
Quick point of privilege. Quick point of personal privilege.
Yes.
Guys, first of all, James Jackson, Sacramento, he, him. I just want to say, can we please keep the chatter to a minimum? I'm one of the people who's very, very prone to sensory overload. There's a lot of whispering and chatter going on. It's making it very difficult for me to focus. Please, can we just, I know we're all fresh and ready to go, but can we please just keep the chatter to a minimum? It's affecting my ability to focus. Thank you.
Thank you, comrade. Okay, is there a
Thank
speaker?
you, comrade. You can't make this up.
Hang on, finish it because the next guy's even funnier.
Oh, it gets worse.
Against name, chapter, pronoun.
Point of personal privilege.
Yes.
Please do not use gendered language to address everyone.
And I remember this one, Clyde, and this, for the first 30 minutes, they couldn't get anywhere because everybody was offended. Everybody was victimized. Everybody had an issue. I mean, can you imagine feeling that somehow or other asking a giant crowd of like 500 people to be quiet because you have a hard time with background noise?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Like
always
that-
been the assumption that if you have an issue, you need to make sure you accommodate for all your issues before you go out in a public setting. You understand that there's, decorum and all this stuff, and people will be polite for you, but this is going overboard. This is like demanding other people accommodate for you in such a ludicrous way.
Yeah, and something's happening with the voice.
No, is something gone wrong?
No, okay, it's okay. All right, there's a lag on my end. So, I got my yellow card here. I mean, they're passing rules that don't even make sense, right? I mean, what is gender parity? Like, first of all, you'd have to figure out how many genders there are. if we agree that there's two, I'd say, okay, so 50% of the people who speak have to be men and women. But now they're we're going to they're getting into an argument of how many genders are there. So if at last count there's 60, so that means 1 out of every 60th person has to be a different gender. If there's no cispan fluid whatever, do they pause until somebody of that gender steps up to the mic? And then they go out and say, like, they basically said that if you don't have a yellow, that everybody but men have a yellow card, is basically what they said.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm going to show up at the convention and go, well, I'm a trans man, or make up some term and grab a card and then ask to grab the mic. I mean, like, this is not, it's funny, but it's also nonsense, right? It's complete nonsense. And these are people who want to get elected and pretend to be a credible party. This is the National Democratic Party of Canada, the NDP. At this convention, they said that they're now in full blown election mode. And but Canada is not a serious country, and God help us if the NDP got elected. Can you imagine? They would probably want these similar kinds. Oh my God! Now I just realized. Yeah, gender parity rules. Maybe that's what the speaker was doing today in the House of Commons.
Maybe
that's what he was doing.
Well, why don't you explain the filibuster? What did he do? What was the situation there?
For people who aren't familiar, so during when Parliament is sitting, the House of Commons sits every day from about 1:30 until about 3:45, 4 o'clock. They sit every day. There's a time set aside, and in the first 20 minutes of the House of Commons, individual MPs get up and just acknowledge things. I want to congratulate Mildred in my riding, who's 90 years old, or I want to recognize this or that or that. But eventually at 2:15 every day, Eastern time, is question period. So question period is back and forth between the parties, and they do the questions through the speaker. Well, at 2:15, when they were ready to start the question period, the speaker stood up and said, well, I want to read a speech. I want to say something. And then he spoke a few minutes, and then it went on longer than a few minutes. And finally, a conservative, and Pierre stood up and said, whoa, it's 2:15 and your speech should have been done earlier. This is question period. And then it got into a sort of an argument over who was right. And so the speaker turned off the mic and turned to some of the people that are there to assist him. And we thought, okay, he was going to realize he was wrong. He doubled down. He insisted that what he was going to do was right. So then Andrew Scheer, a prominent conservative MP who used to be a Speaker of the House back in 2015, he literally pulls out the book and lectures the speaker on what he can and cannot do. And now it got into a pissing match. And so the speaker said, I'm allowed to do this. I'm doing it. And he spoke for 2 hours. 2 hours. He read he lectured the House of Commons on decorum for 2 hours. And then after 2 hours, somebody finally, point of orders. And he said, I'm going to keep on going. So he filibustered for almost 3 hours. Conservatives were turning their back on him, walking out. This will make the news tomorrow. I hope it makes the news tomorrow, but it was unprecedented. I've never, we had a speaker resign a month ago because of the Nazi fiasco. And now we got a new speaker who's off to a really good start. Like it makes no sense.
So was there a point to his filibustering? Because normally a filibuster is to waste the time and then run a clock out, and then it's over, right? Or like bills won't get passed because they
yeah. That's what they're for. There's no point to it today, except that was there bad news that was going to be brought up? We'll never know. Well, I guess we'll know tomorrow. But he definitely took up all of question period. So there was no question period today in the House of Commons. So whatever bad news was going to be brought up by the Conservatives or whoever, we'll have to wait until tomorrow, because he filibustered enough to wipe out question period today. Was he intending to do that? Maybe. Or I think in the end it was a pissing match. I mean, he just literally wanted to say something about decorum and make his mark as the new speaker. Well, he chose an interesting way to make his mark as a new speaker.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, a lot of people are making their marks these days. Trudeau made his mark on Canada, and now the Liberals are turning their back on him. We've got. I saw this article. I caught this earlier today. It's from Politico saying a contender to replace Trudeau faces real test. They've discounted Trudeau completely. They're just like, yeah, he's done. He's done. Let's talk about what's coming next. Let's talk about the next person, and comparing, saying that Jolie is gonna. Have the test of her, career at this point because she's, there's the overseas conflicts and she's the minister of, foreign affairs. But this is what's funniest to me at this point is that they've completely discounted Trudeau. He's done. They don't think that he has any more political equity at all.
He doesn't. I mean, and newspapers are picking up on that too, right? Well, we've seen. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. The national panel there, Chantal Hébert and Andrew Coyne, one day were just turning against Trudeau. We haven't seen Trudeau in a while. And today there was a poll in the National Post. Should Trudeau step down? And then they broke it down by different parties. And of course, people who identify as conservatives said he should step down, but the National Post even said that people who identify as liberals, 44% of them said Trudeau should step down. So when the newspapers are turning against you, even he paid them dearly for those headlines. I mean, he's paying $1.2 billion to the CBC and $600 million to others, and they're starting to turn on him. So he's being discounted, and
it's losing them in the polls, obviously. There was hashtag nobody likes Pierre Poilievre going on Twitter, so I decided to point out the poll saying hashtag nobody likes Pierre Poilievre on the left because they're preemptive sore losers, showing where the polling data is sitting at. It's 194 in favor of the Conservatives if there was an election tomorrow with the seats.
Clyde, this is approaching super majority, right? So a super majority is when a party gets 66% of the votes, and it's only happened twice in Canadian history. Under this large government that we have, I think it's 226 votes for a super majority. So Pierre is creeping up into that territory, which is unprecedented. And speaking of Pierre, I mean, how do you like them apples, right? I mean, people are coming around to Pierre, right? I think people are coming around to Pierre. He does well of not raising up too many issues and keeping low key. But he just happened to be he was in your neck of the woods, wasn't he, when he did that? He was at
unfortunately, I do live streams every Friday. I could have went down to the Pinnacle and met him, but I was busy. I had a prior engagement, so.
So is that close to your place?
A 30-minute drive. I could have gone to see him. Yeah.
And who's the journalist? So people at first thought it was a farmer, but it's not a farmer. It was a journalist, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a journalist. Oh, I had his name.
From a local BC paper or local?
It was from I think the Kamloops Herald or something like that.
Okay. And I love the way Pierre handled himself, right? I mean, he had a journalist one-on-one, and the journalist like you're using populist terms, and Pierre's like, what does that mean? And you're acting Trumpian, and Pierre's like, what does that mean? And some people have said, and he's like, who? And great.
I'll play the clip because I have it here. Pierre Poilievre, so used to gotcha politics, here he is taking questions while eating an apple.
In terms of your sort of strategy currently, you're obviously taking the populist pathway.
What does that mean?
Well, appealing to people's more emotional levels, I would guess. I mean, certainly you tap very strong ideological language quite frequently.
Like what?
Left wing, this and that, right wing. I mean, it's that type of ideological spectrum.
I never really talk about left or right.
Anyways,
I don't really believe in that.
Okay, a lot of people would say that you're simply taking a page out of the Donald Trump book.
Like which people would say that?
Well, I'm sure a great many Canadians, but
like who?
I don't know who, but
well, you're the one who asked the question, so you must know somebody.
I loved it. It was a
Oh
really
my
good
God.
clip. It was a really good clip, and
Yeah.
it's a perfect way. It actually sows the seeds for everybody to be able to use these tactics, because a lot of people will say, a lot of people. I'm doing it now. A lot of people will say this. No, a lot of journalists use this tactic against people, and people will use this on social media and say, preface a question with. So a lot of people are saying that what you say is a whistleblow to the alt-right. And it's like, wait a second. Yeah. Where's the question? Oh, the question is this, but I wanted that premise to you to accept that premise. And he's just not accepting it. He'll just ask questions. Oh, who's saying this? Where do you get this information? Where's this coming from? Because it's a tactic. It's a tactic to smear people.
And what's interesting is that the Liberals have actually taken the same clip and they're trying to spin the clip as something positive. They're trying to use the clip and make Pierre appear, I don't know, aloof or cocky or condescending. I'm like, no. We're seeing beyond that. So whoever at the Liberal Party is trying to use this clip to their advantage, yeah, keep doing it. You're helping us.
Yeah, you're winning people over. Yeah, for sure.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, and all these things. You and I have talked about this a lot. I mean, these are distractions. Like the NDP convention and the Liberals talking about this and about that. It's all distractions. There's some serious issues in this country, and we're not talking. I'm kind of disappointed at all politicians, in a sense, for not talking about the serious issues. I mean, this week on Monday, the Bank of Canada announced the Bank of Canada announced the inflation, the consumer price index for September, and it's still at 3.8. It's nobody's talking about that. It's at 3.8, right? I talked about it a little bit at 3.8, and people rightly so are saying bullshit. 3.8 is probably low. It's accurate the way it's calculated. Is it low? Yeah, you and I know it's low because they're putting more emphasis on certain things and less on others. I mean, it's coming down. I agree, inflation is coming down, but not because of measures that the Conservatives or the Liberals are doing. Inflation's coming down because pressures are working. One of the things that came down last year over year is the price of flight. So if any of your viewers are thinking of getting on a plane, if you can still afford it, going to Mexico will be more affordable than last year because nobody's flying. And so consequently, nobody's flying. So the airlines are dropping their prices. And that's how inflation works its way through eventually. A little bit of measures by the government, but mostly it works its way through on its own.
Well, not to mention housing prices. Housing prices are coming down, and they're coming down at the detriment to people who bought into this idea that you can get rich buying a house. Like that a house is a money earner for you. It's an investment that will earn you $100,000 a year. Like people actually believe this stuff. And if it's too good, if it sounds too good to be true, it's likely because it is too good to be true. And it's not like they're trying to fix the situation. This weird push and pull with the government. They don't want people who own equity in homes to lose their equity. So they keep, initiatives one way. And then they want to keep inflation down, but it's the houses that are inflated, so you need to raise interest rates. But another thing that can change is the lending standards, and this is something that came up today that I read from BNN Bloomberg. And this is real estate sector likely relieved after OSFI response on mortgage proposal. And this expert says the real estate industry is likely breathing a sigh of relief as Canada's banking regulator signaled that it may not move ahead with some proposed tightening of its mortgage lending rules, says one mortgage expert. The acronym is the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, floated the proposal in January as a part of its wide-ranging review of the B20 mortgage underwriting rules. It then involved feedback from stakeholders, including those from the banking, mortgage, and brokering and real estate sectors. The review came as the OSIF or FI said risk around loans and borrowing had increased considerably in recent years. Its proposal included potential adding new conditions for the stress test, where there would be, borrowers must prove that they could continue to make mortgage payments at higher interest rates. So they went against this and they said, hey, we're gonna keep these relaxed lending standards even though the interest rates are going up, and we're gonna bundle us up and we're gonna package them into financial tools, and we're gonna sell them to your mortgage, your retirement savings fund. I mean, this is what happened in the U.S. in 2008, and this is why they imploded.
That's alarming because Canada, we did well. We came through 2008 relatively unscathed, and they always said that because we have these rather strict lending rules and mortgage rules and borrowing rules, and if they loosen those up too much, I fear for what could happen. I mean, is that a function of well, I'd have to read that article, but it's that makes me nervous. Actually, I read a separate article. There is already a correction going on in the housing market, similar to what we talked about earlier. I mean, the higher interest rates, all of that is working. Well, one man's fortune or misfortunes, another man's happiness. But
absolutely.
There's a big drop in prices in Ontario already going on. Big time going on.
Yeah, lots of.
Well, you guys had a crazy announcement this week too. What's the whole announcement around Airbnb? Or what? I mean, it's not housing, but it's part of the whole housing ecosystem. What happened with Airbnb in BC?
So what happened here in British Columbia is we have a huge housing shortage, and largely because of like what I alluded to earlier, this get rich quick scheme of prices are going way up in houses. Let's get into the market. We'll buy a house. If you've got equity and you could get into the market, basically, if you don't have the equity, you're SOL. You're not even getting a down payment into this market. So if you already have equity, you could buy into the market. You can get another property. And people are like, well, why would I get another property? What, a rental? For like, no one's going to rent at these prices. Oh, no, get this. We live in cottage country, so people will Airbnb it. And you can Airbnb it and you get a killing compared to what you would get for a long-term rental with a family in it, something like that. But what it's done is it's exacerbated the shortage on houses because people are buying these houses up and then renting them out as Airbnbs. And some places it's like the whole house is available room by room. So it's a bed and breakfast without supervision. It really can be crazy in some of these situations, and they're cracking down on this, and they're cracking down with some serious fines.
Cracking down meaning the government's cracking down, or like
that's correct.
Does somebody who runs an Airbnb need a permit to do that?
Well,
do you need a business license in BC to do something like that?
This is
how
what
they're cracking down.
Yeah, so this is what's going on. They're actually coming in with some arbitrary measures. They already had measures to say that you can't have an empty house. If you have an empty house, you pay a levy. And it's essentially a tax for having an empty house. They're bringing in these new measures, and it says BC cracking down on short-term rentals with increased fines and new enforcement measures. So it used to be a $1,000 fine if you were caught Airbnb-ing it and not putting it on the rental market. Now it's up to $3,000 daily per infraction. So if you're Airbnb-ing 4 rooms in your house separately, that's $3,000 a pop if you get caught doing it. And they're sending out more people to enforce these and check in on the Airbnbs and make sure that the properties are following this new regulation. $50,000 maximum fine, up from $2,000. So they're really hitting people hard with these. The new compliance and enforcement unit to track offenders. So there was a big announcement from David Eby about this. He's our NDP premier in British Columbia. The signal got out to Chrystia Freeland, and she said she really supports this. And a lot of people immediately are like, whoa, they want to make it national. That's what they're talking about.
Well, and I mean, fundamentally, I'm a libertarian, so I believe in, let the markets decide. So I don't like seeing this kind of interference. I don't mind something to encourage people to do something to help the housing shortage in the short term. But then the cynic in me, thinks that deep down, at the end of the day, the government wants to be the big landlord for everybody, and they don't want any of us owning homes or land. So this helps the government's long-term agenda of getting us all out of housing and the government owning everything. So,
well, this is really just going after these landlords, right? And you could call them slumlords if you want. A lot of people are. They're largely unpopular, especially in British Columbia, for renters because they're really frustrated with the fact that they can't have a home. So from a socialist perspective, and I'm talking about the NDP, it's kind of par for the course when they go after the small minority of people and get popular support from the majority of people, right? So they'll go after the landowners. I mean, this is like textbook like Marxism, those filthy landowners, and this is the thing. Even though they are actually doing something that's really horrible in the marketplace, and it's kind of sickening, and it's largely because of the the ability to profiteer from this shortage.
You guys have a different market in BC. I have to say that it is different. I mean, coincidentally, I was driving around the other day, and I was going to film something, and I didn't, but I think I'll go back and film. I was driving through a neighborhood in the outskirts of Calgary where they're building houses, and I was impressed. Like they were, literally there's 1,000 homes going up. So.
There's not a lot of people vacationing in suburban Calgary.
No,
right?
No, especially not in the Northeast. So it's a different beast. It's a different beast.
So one point that I did bring up though was I'm not really familiar with the hospitality regulations, but there is, I presume, regulations on hotel businesses, right? So hotels that have rooms available for rental on a nightly basis. Now, why? I kind of, maybe I can answer the question as I pop the question, but why would it be that the NDP wouldn't go in the favor of actually regulating Airbnb and this type of thing like they do with the hotels, and probably make a parity of pricing when it comes to the homes, and also raise the cost of operating in this kind of business, have inspectors come out and inspect these locations? It would put a burden on the Airbnb clients, the people that are actually providing these homes, to actually show up and do more due diligence and put more investment into these things instead of just a cash grab. But of course, in that question, I know where the NDP sit. It would be a lengthy process to do that, and it would be not very rewarding politically, because it would just be a regulatory thing. They want the win. Look at us, we took care of those greedy capitalists.
And just you and I in 90 seconds have talked more about common sense, finances, and economics than the NDP will at whatever level you're talking about. They're not talking about this kind of stuff at the convention in Hamilton. They're talking about gender language, or last week was or this week was Happy National. I'm looking at my notes. Coming Out Day. Like again, we have real problems in this. I'd love to sit down. I would love to hear politicians really sit down and talk like you and I are talking, and bounce ideas. Like there's some great
Marty,
ideas. Right?
It dawned on me, this whole coming out day. I mean, it's been gay all year, and you're just coming out now. Like, what is going on?
Oh, Clyde, it's not queued up. I wish it was queued up because I had it on my Twitter feed, but somewhere, I think I tweeted it today. It's similar to all the different flags. So they had these colors for coming out that you were supposed to advertise.
It's a new color scheme for coming out.
A new color scheme, and it's like some of them was like, I came out, but I've already identified with something different than what I came out with, or I came out and I had a bad experience, so I need to come out again, or I'm not ready to come out, or I'll come out when I find something that like literally it's that silly.
Oh wow.
And Yeah. No. Oh God, let's get off this topic. Let's bring it back to my quick home. Well, go ahead.
Well,
Sorry, it's your show.
this does
It's
well. No,
your
it
show.
segues perfectly. So there was news that the Million March for Children was canceled. This was this went out on the website. Drea Humphrey put this out. I did a video for the people that are watching now last night talking about this, but then they re-updated it and said that some locations will be affected. So for people that don't know, there's a second march, a million-person march for children, and this is largely to do with the idea of SOGI, and that's I always forget the acronym. It's sexual orientation and gender identity. It might as well be gender ideology.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what they're pushing on children in schools. And these people say, no, you can't discuss this stuff without our consent to children. And especially what some teachers have been doing, saying they want to keep secrets from parents and not actually inform the parents of what's going on with their children in the school. You have to consent to everything. You can't go to the jungle gym without consent. You can't go to the field trips without consent. Why are they doing this without consent? So people are taking to the street. There's a few different websites. Again, I'll put links in the description, but yeah, this is where you can find out where the locations are near you. And if you want to,
so they're temporarily canceling that. It's in light of, I mean, it's in light of the other protests going on, the war in Israel and things like that. They're going to reschedule for. Yeah,
that's my assumption, but not everybody is keen to have it canceled. So several of these events are still taking place. So you can check the website and you can see where the events are happening. I know from what it looks like, Vancouver's not happening, but Surrey is. So I'll be heading down to Surrey.
Yeah. Great show with Nadine, by the way, earlier. I told you to reach out to her, right? I'm glad you did, and you guys finally connected. And I listened to it. I've met her in person like 2-3 times now, and every time I listen to her talk, I learn more. And then she truly represents what grassroots movements can do in this country or province or whatever. I mean, she literally met with somebody, and the next thing you know, she's got a Facebook group with like 30,000 people and influencing policies, definitely in Saskatchewan. So
absolutely,
if anybody hasn't seen that interview, go find that interview. And I was trying to come up with a segue into this, but I don't know how to come.
Sledgehammer it right in there.
No, but there was something that was making me think of it. But I want to talk about Trudeau's letter to Danielle Smith today.
Oh, right. Well, this comes on the heels actually of a Supreme Court ruling. So that Bill 69, I think it was, where it was called the No Pipelines Law, and it's been stricken down. No way.
Well, actually, now we're bringing up a couple of issues. So no, Bill C-69 was struck down. That was one thing, and
am I mixing those up?
Yeah, you're mixing up the Trudeau today sent the letter to Danielle asking her politely to reconsider launching Alberta's own Alberta pension plan.
Well, this is what I'm saying. It came on the heels of this, right? So it came on the heels of the news of the No Pipelines thing, and then he goes right to Alberta where they're going to be doing the pipelines, and they have a lot of political clout right now, and it's looking good. And also Alberta wants to take back the pensions.
Let's come back. I remember what made me think of it.
Oh, okay.
So weird. Let me. So I'm thinking. This is what I'm thinking. There's a nasty event going on in the world right now, which is war in the Middle East, war in Ukraine, and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So for the march to put things on hold is appropriate. But then, ironically, I find it ironic. In Trudeau's letter today to Danielle Smith, that's what that's the bullshit excuse he used. He's like, please consider dropping your quest for an Alberta provincial pension right now because the world is stressful and Canadians need a little stability. I'm like, wow,
no.
The pot kettle calling the kettle black. Trudeau, you are the instability.
Yeah.
And so for you to plead with others to to pause their initiatives to create more stability. No, piss off, Trudeau, piss off. Like,
no,
you want to create stability in this world, you step down and you shut up for a while, and then the rest of us will go on. But that was rich of Trudeau today to for your viewers, right? I mean, Alberta has been is contemplating getting out of the Canada pension plan, which any province is allowed to do. Quebec's already done it, and Alberta wants to go its own with its own Alberta pension plan. And Trudeau's saying, actually read the letter, whoever, it's on the internet, it's all over the place. He's basically saying Albertans will hurt the rest of Canada if we do that. So the way I read that, it's like, okay, well, at least you're acknowledging that that Albertans are more than
paying their fair share. Yeah, I would say a lot of Albertans have paid a ton of money into the Canadian pension plan. And well, what did the federal government do with that money? They just largely blew it. They absolutely blew it. And yeah, of course, people don't have any sympathy for Trudeau in the moment when he came out with his fangs drawn in the time of COVID-19, and he demonized people for not wanting to take the vaccine, and he used that as political clout to pass his initiatives like the.
Well, he had a speech earlier in the week. I don't know. Somebody took his speech in the House of Commons where he stood up as like, Canadians stand for the rights of his bullshit platitudes. Yeah. But somebody overlaid a laugh track on top of Trudeau speaking.
I did see that.
That one. That's really good. That's really good.
But when everyone was suffering because of his implementation of COVID rules, he doubled down with more COVID rules. He was coming in with more, telling people they'll never get to travel, tightening his grip, and even adding the Arrive Can app, which ended up being the catalyst, the straw on the camel's back when it came to truck drivers that were cross-border traveling, who were heroes up until that moment. Yep. Right, they were heroes until they said, no, I'm not complying with this new thing, and now we're seeing criminal investigation into embezzlement, into what's going on with how they implemented the contracting of even making that app.
Whether it's Arrive Can, like I've had people say, hey, I could have done Arrive Can for $200,000. Perhaps the software, there's a little more to it. It has to be integrated, I don't know, to readers or whatever, but is it worth 50 or 80 million bucks? Absolutely not. No. And we throw numbers around in this country like that all the time. The other one I don't like is the ventilators that were purchased for, I don't know, $100 million, and we never got any of them. Actually, can we segue real quick? Can you bring up, can you go to can we talk about the budget? Can we I want to talk about the budget really, really quickly for your viewers. So just go, I pinned it to the top of my tweets there. If you find my tweet, just pin it up. I want to show I just want to show a couple of things, because when we talk about money, like at the Canadian federal government, it's insane how bad our Canadian finances are. And so while you bring that up, the Canadian government puts out its budget and does things, but there's an arm of the Canadian government called the Parliamentary Budget Office. And there's an officer there in charge, and his job and his department's job is just to look at the government's budget and give it a quality check. And then once a year, he publishes what's called, the fiscal and outlook for the country. And one of the things I don't like about the Parliamentary Budget Officer's outlook is he publishes it once a year, but what he does is he only looks at the previous year. He never looks at history and context, and then he forecasts forward. So I put together a couple of slides. I just want to show that slide real quick. Mm-hmm. On the left is 2018, 19, 20, and 21 is the big bar. What the viewers are looking at there is the total Canadian government's spend. And so that's for salaries of employees, our Navy, our Coast Guard, capital projects like building bridges, airports, whatever. And so prior to COVID, the Canadian government as a whole spent just under $400 billion a year delivering services for Canadians. Mm-hmm. Now, on top of that blue bar is the little orange bar, and I'll talk about that just in a minute. That's just debt servicing. So you can see
that's
we ran
interest we have to pay on our debts.
Just the interest on our debt. So we ran under 400 billion, and then during COVID, holy shit, man, we spiked up to like whatever $700 billion. So in 1 year during COVID in 2021, the government spent twice what it would spend in a normal year.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see after that, we've never come back to pre-COVID. So now we're forecasting budgets in the 500 billion a year after year. And the little dotted lines are the parliamentary budget officer's forecasts, and his forecasts have always been wrong. So just scroll down real quick. So we're in a 5. So the yeah, you got to click on yeah, there you go. Next one. So that's the deficit. So that's even though we spend $500 billion, the government doesn't even take that much money into its treasury. The government takes, $450 billion. So the bars here is just the deficit. So remember back in 2015 when Trudeau was going to get elected, and he said, I promised to run little deficits and then have a balanced budget in 2019.
Yeah.
They're not even forecasting a balanced budget until even beyond 2028. There's no balance. We're in deficits forever, and not little deficits. We're talking 20 billion dollar deficits year after year. So scroll up.
On what grounds do they say this? Because it's trending up, right? It's trending up.
It's to make,
but then
they're.
I mean, if there's trend going upwards, why would you ever forecast that it goes down?
Yeah, we're spending out of control. I mean, our annual our spending programs is $500 billion a year, but the taxes we bring in don't increase. I mean, when you tax Canadians at about 50%, when you add in your federal, provincial, and municipal, that's it. Like if you try and tax a Canadian at 60% or any citizen, they'll go underground. They'll stop working. Or
they'll work under the table, or they'll leave the country or whatever.
Yeah, there's no more places to find money to finance the budget, so they have to borrow. So this is basically borrowing money. I mean, look at that big.
Meanwhile, they're talking about universal basic income, which is a massive.
We can't afford it. No, because so go to the next one, which will show that that's the debt. That's the total debt. So orange was our debt, prior to COVID was in the $900 million. We're at $1.2 trillion in debt. And if you look at the forecast, the debt doesn't go down because the government's not forecasting to pay off the debt. There's no provision in any budget.
Why is it trending down? Did everyone?
No, that line trending down is the debt to GDP ratio, which is trending down because they're artificially increasing the GDP in the future. But the bars are
from
the
government
actual
spending.
Debt.
I always never understood how they include government spending.
No. So and I bring this up to people like this isn't. Trudeau doesn't give a shit because he'll be gone. Trudeau is not putting any money in any budgets to pay down the debt. This is Pierre Poilievre's problem. So I'll just go to the last one real quick then. And so that is unfortunately, that is just the servicing of the debt. So remember when Trudeau said, hey, let's borrow money because it's only 1% interest at an all-time low? Well, historically, the solid orange bars, we're paying on every year out of our $400 billion budget, 10% of it, $40 billion is just interest to foreign banks and lenders. And now it goes up. And the parliamentary budget officer, again, is like, it's not so bad. It won't go up that much because interest rates will come back down. Dude, you've been wrong. So if interest rates don't come back down
yeah, unless we see some massive deflationary pressures, like I'm talking
totally,
deflation, not inflation, like where people can appreciate the their currency, that kind of deflation. We're not going to see that.
Yeah, so sorry to hijack your show a little bit, but I just wanted to show that. I mean, the finances of the country are they're in dire. We're in trouble, man. And
Well, I've got one graph for you. I got one graph for you.
Actually, just scroll back up to that last one real quick.
Okay, I'll get to this one after.
Yeah, that dotted line there. The Canadian government always justifies borrowing money by saying our debt to GDP, to gross domestic production, is. If you look on the right scale, it's at less than 40%. Sure, that's the federal debt. If you add the provincial debt and the municipal debt and the personal debt, Canada's debt to GDP is at 110%. Like
it's got to be more than that. No, it's got to be way more than that because we just passed in the past December, Canadian household debt surpassed GDP.
Right. So we're at 150% or some number like that. It's such a huge number. And if you and I ran our finances like that, what's the equivalent of a GDP for a person? A GDP for a person would be your salary.
Yeah.
So if your salary is $100,000 a year and you have not your mortgage, well, even your mortgage, I wouldn't. But if your personal debt was 2 times your salary, you're in deep, deep trouble. That's your credit card debt, not your mortgage. Your mortgage. But
here's where it gets really like how they flub the numbers, right? So you use your analogy of, your salary is your GDP. Well, what the government does is they use their salary as GDP, and then when they go out in the yard and they build themselves a deck and spend money on a deck, they include that to their salary.
Absolutely,
including that on their salary. And imagine doing that with a tax man. You'd have an incredible tax bill at the end of the year.
Yeah, and they make unrealistic predictions. They go, I'm going to double my salary in the next 10 years. And you go, how? It's like, I'm going to work more hours. It's like, well, you're already working 2,500 hours. How are you going to work more hours? I'm going to be more productive. How are you going to do that? So those are the bullshit things that I get discouraged when I see the parliamentary, because that blue line, that GDP ratio, when you dig into it, those are exactly the things. That's why the government is letting in 1 million immigrants, because then you can say, in 20 years from now, we'll have 70 million people, and our GDP will be productive 3 times,
and they'll all stay.
They'll all be productive.
Right.
They'll be more productive than the previous generation of Canadians, and that's the kind of crap they say.
Well, I hate to be give you more pessimism.
Show me your numbers.
Here's another chart. This is the money supply in Canada, and it doesn't look like much here until you go to a column graph and then max it out. And there's our money supply that came in right around the COVID era, just skyrocketed. And you wonder why there's inflation. Inflation is a monetary phenomenon. When you deflate or when you inflate the currency, all it is, I mean, the analogy is like you have a slice of bread, and that's the amount of money or wealth that there is in a nation. If you slice it more times, it doesn't mean that you have more bread. It just means you have nominally less bread per slice. And that's what's happening to our currency. And the people who spend it first get it at full value. It's really, really an insidious tax that they put on the population. And if people will argue up and down that it's not a tax, it absolutely is a tax.
And let's wrap this segment up real quick by talking UBI. I'm not going to talk about the pros and cons of UBI. I'm just going to say, what would a universal basic income cost? There's 30 million Canadians that are above the age of 16. So pick a number. If you're going to give 30 million Canadians $10,000 a year, that's $300 billion. That's our current budget. So if you pick any number north of that, you want to give every Canadian above the age of 16, you want to give them $30,000, the equivalent of minimum tax or minimum wage. That's 30 times 30. That's $900 billion. So anybody who's talking about universal basic income, and people say, "Oh, we'll cut something else." What's there to cut? We're already in debt. We're already borrowing. You're going to cut, what are you going to cut? What's universal basic income going to replace? Unemployment insurance and your pension plan and a few other things. That's 5% of the current government's budget.
Well,
so
the thing that people don't realize, though, as well as it being inflationary, they're not taxing and then giving the money out. They're borrowing the money from the Bank of Canada that's just printing it, and then they're issuing bonds, deflating the value, or reducing the value of those bonds, and then they give it out to everybody, and then that number just becomes the new zero. So if you don't get it, you're actually negative. So if you don't get it, you have to opt in, because that $1,000, say it is a month, it's that's the new zero. $1,000 will get you squat. That's really where we're at.
No, it's a simple experiment. You put 4 children in a room and give each child an Oreo cookie and ask them to trade among themselves. Well, there's nothing to trade. So what am I going to trade? Because everybody got an Oreo cookie. So an Oreo cookie is worthless in terms of trade. What am I going to trade? Give you my Oreo cookie for your Oreo cookie? Okay, now I got 2 Oreo cookies, or I got my Oreo cookie back. They're worthless. So you might as well eat the Oreo cookie, and giving out $30,000 to everybody in the country just makes the first $30,000 in everybody's pocket meaningless. But totally different topic. And all I wanted to say is the country's finances are in such poor shape that we need to talk about these things before we don't. I mean, when I hear the NDP and the Liberals talking about UBI, please folks, please, well, don't vote for the NDP no matter what. I mean, unless you got a yellow card.
Well, it is the end of the economic system in Canada if UBI comes into play. I really believe so. It'll be the end of the dollar, and most people, what they'll end up doing is collect that and then work under the table. They won't be able to afford anything. They'll tax. I mean, we've seen this. The Soviet Union tried it. Notable place that you could go if you really want to experiment with this stuff. North Korea. I hear they're really opening up their doors to people, and they could use the help.
No, well, the Soviet Union is a great example. Like I said, my friends from behind the Iron Curtains are the best ones, man. They're the best warnings. They're the canaries who warn us about this. And I talked to a lady the other day, said, what finally collapsed the Soviet Union is everybody's tired of eating the same old stale bread. So one person decides to clandestinely grow a garden in their backyard. And now because they're growing a garden, they got fresh tomatoes. And what do? They trade their fresh tomatoes with somebody else who's got a clandestine chicken and got eggs. And the next thing you know, capitalism and trade is back in place. So you can't, capitalism is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
Well, it's the natural state of things.
Yep.
I think the only thing that happens to disrupt it with people will call it cronyism. That's the government getting in the way and inserting itself in the middle of it. I'm a big fan of the laissez-faire approach to market economies, and I mean, prove me wrong, please. I'm up for the discussion anytime.
We're out of topics.
I think we're out of. It's been a week. All right, Marty, tell everybody where can they find you.
Marty Up North on Twitter and Marty Up North on YouTube.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure the links are in the description down below. Go check him out, and we'll see you guys next week with another one of these. Everybody keep on trucking.
Cheers, everyone.